任せろ。
風が吹き、この一矢で十分。
痛い目に遭う。
風が吹き、この一矢で十分。矢はつがい、天をつく。風が吹き、この一矢で十分。
Head of the Skyfaring Commission on the Xianzhou Luofu, a seasoned pilot and a deadshot. Since heading up the commission, she's been buried under mountains of paperwork. Yukong is a 4-star imaginary character that specializes in granting team-wide buffs while also dishing out high-damage nukes herself from time to time. She follows the Harmony path. Naturally, as a Harmony class character, she will have methods to increase a character or the team's damage output. Yukong, however, is leaning more towards the Harmony branch of characters that buffs allies, while also trying to deal some damage themselves. As an imaginary element character, this means that if Yukong is able to deplete an enemy's toughness bar, she will deal small extra damage and imprison the target. Imaginary element's break effect is considered to have the strongest crowd control if compared to the other elements. An imprisoned target will suffer from 2 effects. One is from a slow debuff that reduces their speed by 10%. Second, it will delay their action by 30%. The effects of Imprison can be improved by Break Effect stat. Knowing the details of Imaginary Element's Break Effect is important, because unlike other Harmony characters, Yukong's ultimate and enhanced basic attacks have great toughness bar-breaking capabilities. Before moving on with the guide, I would like to emphasize on Yukong's biggest problem: speed tuning. With the way Yukong's skill works, you will have to optimize your character's speed stats to work in Yukong's favor. If you don't like that idea at all, especially when your main carry utilizes speed-boosting passives, then Yukong might not be for you. As a Harmony class character, even if Yukong can dish out decent amounts of damage, her top priority is to buff her allies. This makes it easy to know which part of her kit we should focus on. That will be her skill that grants allies a massive attack boost, and her ultimate that also grants allies a massive critical stat boost. Luckily, her ultimate is also her biggest source of damage nukes, so we would definitely want to shorten the turns needed to cycle her ultimate. So, to maximize the performance of an E0 Yukong, we first need to give her speed boots to cycle turns faster. Then, we give her an energy rope to allow her to shorten the turns needed to cycle her ultimate. Please note that I specifically mentioned E0, and this will be important as things can change with more of her Eidolons unlocked. As for relics, based on the math, nothing beats the 4-piece Wastelander set for her as a sub-damage dealer, even if there would be no sources of imprisonment debuff. The 4-piece effect that grants 10% critical rate just beats any other 2 is to 2 relic combinations. The condition for it is also very easy to achieve since it simply requires 1 debuff on the enemy. When it comes to the planner set, it will depend on your playstyle. Yukong isn't really hard to understand. Speed tuning is hard in a way that you need to keep Yukong and your main carry's speed super close, but that's not really complex. It's only difficult since we have no control over the substats of our relics. The idea is to prevent anyone from squeezing in between Yukong and your main carry, and this is especially important when using past and future LC or battle isn't over LC. After all, these LCs will only buff the character that moves after Yukong uses her skill. It also means that Yukong is anti-synergistic with characters that manipulate their own speed or action values, such as advancing forward on certain conditions. For example, Dan Heng's A4 trace has a chance to improve his own speed. This means that depending on the speed gap between Yukong and Dan Heng would eventually take over Yukong's turn, and always move first before Yukong. When you find a main carry that works well with Yukong and fine-tune their speed, then Yukong's gameplay becomes very straightforward. All you need to do is to use Yukong's skill as much as possible to buff the main carry that takes action after her turn. Chain Yukong's skill into her ultimate to improve the effects of her skill, so that it also grants critical stat boosts on top of the massive attack stat increase. There's 2 viable playstyles for Yukong, an SP negative playstyle and an SP neutral playstyle. Let's compare both playstyle while covering their advantages and disadvantages. First and foremost, the playstyle names already state the obvious. One makes Yukong SP hungry because she will only spam her skill, while the other makes her SP neutral by alternating her basic attack and skill. When it comes to Yukong's individual performance as a sub-damage dealer, the SP negative playstyle is slightly inferior to the SP neutral playstyle. She will do roughly 2 to 3% less overall damage. However, the main carry would roughly do 6 to 7% more overall damage, since there is more buff uptime compared to the SP neutral playstyle. Before moving on, I would like to mention that I am taking into account Welt as the main carry, because as of currently, Welt is our current best imaginary element damage dealer. If I take into account every single possible carry that synergizes with Yukong, this guide will never end. Moving on. Since SP negative playstyle easily allows a 3-turn cycle on Yukong's ultimate, this means that Welt himself would also be able to use a 3-turn ultimate cycle build. Therefore, Welt would be able to spam his ultimate, and the team would greatly benefit from its effects. You might be wondering, is Welt not allowed to do 3-turn ultimate cycles with an SP neutral Yukong? He could, but he won't be able to sync his ultimate with the critical stat buff from Yukong's ultimate, since an SP neutral playstyle is best played with 4-turn ultimate cycles. There is an exception, however, where you can have an SP positive Yukong. Only problem is that it will require heavy investments, and would weaken her damage output significantly. I will talk more about this later. The SP neutral playstyle would provide better average toughness break of 7 break units every 4 turns, compared to the 3 break units every 3 turns of the SP negative playstyle. Those are the most notable differences between the two playstyles, but if you are still unable to decide, here are some things that might help. If you are playing with a defense shredder to maximize the damage of your main carry, then an SP negative Yukong would be the better pick. The current defense shredders in the game can easily be SP positive, especially Pella, who can literally just spam basic attacks, but would still manage to have short-turn cycles on her ultimate. Having better uptime on Yukong's buff would also help the defense shredder potentially be a sub-damage dealer, especially Silverwolf, who actually boasts a high attack modifier on her ultimate. And as most of you already know, there is Luocha, who greatly benefits from the team-wide attack increase as his heal scales with his own attack stat. The biggest issue of playing with an SP negative Yukong is that it would require your 2 other characters to be SP positive. This means that if you switch to an SP neutral Yukong playstyle, you can easily add another SP neutral character. For example, if the enemy is in a weakness broken state, an E1 Sushang is basically SP neutral against it, as her skill won't consume SP. Although you might encounter some issues with Sushang's speed boosting passives. Personally, I went with the SP negative playstyle. Remember when I specifically said that an E0 Yukong needs an energy rope? With E2, you won't need it anymore. This Eidolon is a game changer. It allows Yukong to drop energy rope for an attack rope, which allows her to do her sub-damage dealer role significantly better. However, as you can see on this SP negative rotation, there might be times where you will lack 1 energy to be able to use Yukong's ultimate. So to be safe, use a Vonwak planner set. You can ignore this problem if you are using Battle Isn't Over LC. This should also emphasize the importance of Battle Isn't Over LC. This LC with Yukong's E2 will guarantee that you are able to use better planner sets than Vonwak. For example, Ageless to buff your team further, or Salsoto to improve Yukong's damage further. Then we have the most misunderstood Eidolon of Yukong, her E6. If you already watched other YouTube guides for Yukong, I'm pretty sure you already heard how this Eidolon basically extends her skill buff by only using Yukong's ultimate after 1 stack of her skill has been used. But this method of using her E6 creates a problem. Yukong can only have a maximum of 2 stacks of her skill buff, meaning the character that goes after Yukong needs to spend a stack first without being granted the critical stat boost coming from Yukong's ultimate. After all, the idea is to have the character that goes after Yukong spend a stack first, so that Yukong could use her ultimate afterwards and generate another stack. So let's say you ignore this problem. Who are you extending the buff for? If you can't brute force the enemy, you would always need 1 character as source of the team's survivability. Is there a point to having the buff reach your survivability character? Even if your survivability character is Luocha, Luocha doesn't exactly need a direct attack buff since he already overheals your characters. Luocha is already satisfied with the team-wide attack boost, since it would already boost his heals that occur even if it is not his turn. The only way this skill buff extension could work is if the character that goes after Yukong is just a sub-damage dealer, and the next character is actually your main carry that could utilize an effect that allows them to move again after their turn. For example, Su Shang's ultimate makes her advance forward by 100%. This means that she could do her popular skill to ultimate to skill combo, and have all attacks benefit from both of Yukong's buffs. Otherwise, if the second character that goes after Yukong cannot utilize such an effect similar to Su Shang's ultimate, then you just wasted the chance to apply both of Yukong's buffs to your other sub-damage dealer. Not to mention, speed tuning your main carry's speed to go after the character that goes after Yukong makes speed tuning much more troublesome. Even worse if you're using past and future LC or battle isn't over LC, since it won't buff your main carry. In my opinion, there are two ways to greatly benefit from Yukong's E6. Here's an example scenario. Yukong and Seely's ultimate is ready to be used, but it is not Yukong's turn. You wait until it is Seel's turn and use Yukong's ultimate. Seel can start her attack through her ultimate to kill an enemy. Seel triggers her talent, which allows her to act again. Her talent is considered as an extra action, therefore is not considered an actual turn. After Seel uses her extra action, she would still have Yukong's buffs. She can now use her actual turn to attack again, and finally burn the buff stack. Or, kill another enemy, trigger another extra action, and finally burn the buff stack. As a side lesson, it is important to distinguish which attack actually ends a character's turn. Ultimates, follow-up attacks, counters, and even extra actions from Seely's talent, or Bronya's skill do not end a character's turn. These are all considered extra actions, therefore, these attacks won't burn any of Yukong's stacks. Here's another example scenario. Your team has very good speed tuning, and your main carry always goes after Yukong's turn. When it was Yukong's turn, you realized that if you do a basic attack, it would still generate enough energy to cap Yukong's energy. Therefore, to get that extra SP, you used Yukong's basic attack instead. Now that it's your main carry's turn, you use Yukong's ultimate to grant them both of her buffs. This works best if Yukong is wearing Planetary Rendezvous LC, since its effect does not require Yukong to cast her skill. However, I think it is still worth getting that SP even if you are using Past and Future or Battle isn't over LC. After all, some SP-positive characters aren't true SP-positive. For example, while March 7th is considered SP-positive, she still needs to shield herself every 3 turns, assuming her shield managed to last that long. Or your healer might need to perform an emergency heal through their skill. Based on my own experience in higher floors of Memory of Chaos, this specific use of Yukong's E6 had made a lot of my runs much more comfortable. Those extra SP generations can be clutch. Before I end this section, I would like to point out an issue with Yukong's E6. If you used her basic attack and instantly followed it with her ultimate, that means her turn hasn't ended yet when you used her ultimate. Therefore, she will eat the buff stack she generated after truly ending her turn, and the next character won't be able to benefit from her buffs. The only way to make Yukong SP positive is to give her Battle Isn't Over LC, an Energy Rope and Von Wack Plano set. By using 2 basic attacks and 1 skill cast, she would have enough energy for her ultimate. 1 basic attack and 1 skill is SP neutral, but the extra basic attack means she generates at least 1 SP per ultimate cycle. I do, however, have one big issue with this build. It really kills off a lot of her damage output. Not to mention, how would you maximize her basic attack talent with this rotation? Do you perform basic attack, skill then basic attack? That means there won't be any buff stacks to enhance by her ultimate, unless she is E6, where at least the next character after her would get the buffs. Or do you perform 2 basic attacks first, then skill? That means one of the basic attacks won't be enhanced by her talent. Honestly, there's just so many issues I find with this specific playstyle that I do not recommend it. Overall, Yukong is a very strong character that could buff your team and even perform well as a sub-damage dealer. Right now, she is just misunderstood because the concept of having a Harmony be a sub-damage dealer is still not fully explored by many players. Yukong and Asta are basically Harmony class characters that fall into a sub-branch where they are meant to be performing sub-damage dealer roles on top of their main supportive role. For example, the complaint I hear the most is that Yukong is too hungry for SP. They would continue to say that it becomes a problem for their damage dealers. Yes, damage dealers, plural form. The thing is, Yukong is already a part of your damage dealers as soon as she joined the team. So if anything, you only just need one main carry on your team while Yukong herself will take on the second damage dealer role. As a Harmony class character, people tend to invest less on them because they don't expect them to deal damage. If your Yukong is performing poorly, it is mostly due to that mindset. The background video playing is my Yukong that is properly built as both a buffer and a sub-damage dealer. Definitely not the best due to bad substats, but it is already at a level worth taking into consideration. If you aren't satisfied with her performance, then I would suggest not pulling for or building Yukong. But if you like what you are seeing, then pull for her and build her. And that's it for now. Like if you enjoyed the video and subscribe for more content.
So try and then let's shift